everyone. My name is Michael Sechen. I'm the podcast host. This podcast is made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. It is part of the Let Us Be Heard series supported by HMS. Subscribe, like, comment, share with others. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And today's guest is Kerstin Söderblom, and she was already our guest on this podcast. So at the end of this podcast, I'm actually going to put up a link to her previous video so you can watch this too, because she talked about queer theology and how we can approach the Bible with another set of glasses, with our queer glasses. Today, we're going to hear a little bit more about her story, her personal story, and her work that is much wider than just queer theology. So hello, Kerstin, and welcome again to the Priceless Podcast.
Hello, Michael. I'm so happy to be here. Great to see you.
I'm happy to have you again, and thank you for being willing to sharing your personal story. So let us dive right in and start with the first question. Some viewers and listeners maybe haven't listened to your first video, so could you introduce yourself and say who is Kerstin? And I'm sure that you will also input something else that you didn't say the first time.
Yes. Well, who is Kerstin? First of all, I'm an ordained minister of the Protestant Church in Germany since the end of the 90s. And since February 2020, I'm a university chaplain at the University of Mainz in Germany. I'm also a lecturer in practical theology and pastoral care, and I'm a counselor, certainly for students, but also for others, a religious advisor, conflict mediator, and coach. I'm 58 years old, and I come from a small city south of Frankfurt in Germany. And just to dive right into a little bit of that background, in my school years, lesbian or gay relationships or queer gender identities were not talked about, and queer role models or out celebrities at the time were not to be seen, or at least I didn't know about them. So to tell you a little bit more already at the beginning about my background, my coming out only happened during my theology studies at the University of Hamburg in the mid-80s, when I was about 22, 23 years old. And at the one hand side, it was a very liberating experience for me to finally come out and understand so many things that I didn't understand before. And on the other side, it was quite difficult and painful, because here I was studying theology and asking myself, is there a future for me in the church, in the Protestant Church of Germany at the time? Because in the 80s, also in the 90s, also the Protestant Church in Germany was still very ambivalent about the topics of homosexuality and in general. And the people there were deeply divided over the topic. And it would only take another 20 to 25 years to hear and read a clear yes from most of the Protestant denominations to queer clergy and queer lay people in church. And it took even longer to hear a clear yes to same-sex blessings or even same-sex marriages and to rainbow families. So in a way, as we know, our churches are torn apart and split over these issues up to this day. So here I was really in the middle of all these questions in my coming out years. And fortunately, to also say that at the very beginning, my church turned out to be very supportive. I came out to representatives of the church even before I had passed my exams. And one person in the personnel department summarized the comment like that: you are accepted and or will be ordained as minister because of your qualifications and not because of your lifestyle or your sexuality. So that comment was good for me, and it helped me a lot to continue with my studies in my theology studies. And I did pass my exams, even though there were struggles and times of crisis and conflict in between. So what else is there to say about me to start with? Well, since almost 16 years, I lived together with Ulrike, my partner, and last December we got married. And this year in July, we plan a big ecumenical blessing ceremony, and we want to celebrate our relationship and our love with family and friends. And I'm very excited about it and look forward to it.
We're going to get a little bit into the story because I'm interested about the story behind your marriage and getting married after 16 years. But I wanted to ask you, how is it for you? As much as I know, your church is actually marrying
Yes.
same-sex couples. How is it for you to just get blessed within the church?
Yeah, that's well, you hit the point. It's all about our 16 years of struggling with this question of whether or not to become married or blessed or the whole package. And you are right, my church is open and marries same-sex couples for the last couple of years. But my partner, Ulrike, she is Roman Catholic. And here starts the struggle. And so to tell you a little bit about our common way to where we are now, for very long, this marriage or even a blessing ceremony that we are planning now, an ecumenical one, was practically impossible for us to picture. And just for you to know, my partner works as an executive director in a social Catholic organization. So therefore, she, as a leader of a Catholic organization, is actually not allowed to marry a same-sex partner according to Roman Catholic Church laws. And she risks, even up to this day, losing her job and her career, so to say, because she is doing this kind of work for the last 20 years. And she's also almost 60, so it's not so easy to change jobs and organizations at that age anymore. And that is the reason why we did not marry earlier. Many colleagues and friends of Ulrike and our common friends did know that she was living together with a woman, that she was and still is a lesbian, but the bishop didn't know that officially. And this type of don't ask, don't tell kind of logic really was and still is very painful for us. And she and I, of course, also, she hated the double life and the double standards that the Roman Catholic Church forced employees to construct. But at the same time, she stayed in church. And up to this day, the Catholic faith still is her home. So it's all these ambivalences that really are difficult. I myself respected her choices. And even though I am a very queer and outspoken activist, since I came out as a theology student in my 20s, I accepted that our relationship was invisible, at least officially, and our love was not openly shown, at least in this type of work surroundings, for very many years. And that, of course, for me, was and still is a very strange development for a very outspoken queer activist. So I experienced with my own body, heart, and soul what it meant not to be able to live your life and your love openly and proudly the way you wanted it to do, as so many other thousands and hundred thousands people have experienced it at the same time. So I'm not only a counselor for queer people that come to my office and say, well, I have experienced all this discrimination. I've, in a way, even at least on the side next to Ulrike, have seen and experienced some of that. And also this, this fear that somebody in the church leadership would find out and use it against us was always lingering there. And what kind of church is that when you produce fear, stress, and pressure for your employees to not be at your best and be the person that you are in the whole sense of the word, but compartmentalize your life and split things and not tell about certain things as queer people do in the Catholic Church. That's just crazy. It drove me crazy. And so that was a very painful twist in my life, to be out in my church and have to see how my partner was struggling with her church for so long. And so then last year, really, Ulrike had suffered from a burnout. It was a COVID-19 related burnout. And she used her time of sick leave to really think about some things in her life. And she was also asking herself, well, what is important in my life? And of course, relationship and love is important. And what am I waiting for? Do I want to wait forever for my church to change attitudes? They will certainly not do that within our lifetimes. And that for her was the point when she said, I'm sick and tired of this whole business. We're gonna get married. And so that's what we did. And we talked about it. We shared our feelings and our joy, and also those moments of worries. And then we decided we go for it. And then within 10 days, really, we had an appointment at the registry office in Mainz and celebrated our marriage on December 29th last year with close friends and family. Due to COVID restrictions, it was a small group, but it was a wonderful day. And it was such a relief and a great joy to be there, to get married, to have our friends and families around, and they drank champagne with us. And when I actually see it and look at the photos of this day, I can see happiness, laughter, and big smiles in all our faces. And I'm so grateful and happy that we did it. And to close this little story, Ulrike so far has not heard anything from her bishop or her church leaders yet. Indeed, I think they basically also have other things to do at the moment in Germany, because they have to deal with what is called here #out in church, which is a very interesting development in the Catholic Church in Germany at the moment.
I want to know a little bit more about what this whole movement out in church is, but let me first ask, you said that she couldn't be out in her working place and her church. What about your families and friends? Could you be yourselves with your families and your friends?
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
Good.
My parents are very open and supportive. I mean, my father, it took him 10 years to accept me as a lesbian and not only see it as a phase or something that, I haven't met the right person yet. All these sentences that so many of us know, my father also quoted them. But, 10 years later, he actually acknowledged that his daughter would just stay the way she is, and that she is happy, the way she is, and he accepted that finally. And then, interesting enough, he was then the biggest fighter for queer rights also in his parish, because they, within a church council process, decided not to bless. At that time, it was still blessing ceremonies for same-sex couples. And when my father heard that, he went to the pastor in charge and said, well, my daughter is lesbian, and I'm not satisfied with the decision of your church council because they are actually discriminating against same-sex couples. So I protest here, you know. So that was his coming out to his parish. So he went quite a long way. And as to Ulrike's family, she has 3 siblings, just as myself, and they are all very, very supportive. Also with friends and family, we spent, vacation together. We see one another during holidays at Easter time or Christmas time. So that's no problem anymore. Even though for some of them it also took some time to to get used to the idea that their daughter or their sister or whoever it was is a lesbian or a queer person. But I guess I also needed time for myself to adjust to that, because it's just still we are living in a heteronormative world, and so we all have to adjust to those things because we somehow get very much we somehow inhale that kind of norms and restrictions, and it's very difficult for all of us, I guess, to get out of them at some time or somehow or the other.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this story about your father. I think that's so amazing to hear that parents can change the mind and
Absolutely.
that it takes time sometimes. You mentioned 10 years. So that's, and then he even became, an ally and
Absolutely.
fought for the rights of queer people. So that's amazing to hear. And I think it can give a lot of hope to us, and I hope to the listeners and viewers who see this. So you mentioned out in church. Can you tell us a little bit about this, what it is?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Protestant myself, so I'm not an expert on this movement, but of course, as being German and being open to queer developments, I find it extremely exciting. And also, since we are in a mixed or ecumenical marriage, as I told you before, it's very exciting also for Ulrike and myself. It actually started to be in public in January 22, so it's not long ago. It was 125 queer Catholics coming out in public at the same time through documentary film that was broadcast on public TV in Germany. And it was well accompanied with media presence, with flyers, brochures, and also social media presence. So that was very touching to first see this documentary and listen to very many queer Catholics, lesbian, gays, bisexuals, trans, inter people in all their different phases in life, to listen to their struggles with the Roman Catholic Church, as I told you about Ulrike a while ago, and the pain, the frustration, the longing for acceptance, and all of that, and how each and every one of them dealt with it, and the courage it must have taken to really be out there, because for all of them, as for Ulrike, it's not sure what will happen to them. But of course, they knew when they are 125 people having their coming out all at the same time, not only in this documentary, but also in social media, and that it will be very, very difficult, obviously, for the Roman Catholic Church to fire all of them at the same time. So, this critical mass was there to really be safe in a way, So the whole thing turned out to be a big success story. Many other queer Catholics, Roman Catholics, followed this public outing, and now it's more than 400 or 500 stories being out there in the social medias, people showing their faces, saying some words about why they are coming out now, what they hoped for and what they are longing for, being Christian and queer at the same time, and wanting to connect things that the Roman Catholic Church for very long told them that there couldn't be a connection, that it could only be either being Christian or queer. And so there was also a manifesto published with 7 paragraphs, on how to stop discrimination against queer Catholic employees, and how to become an open and queer affirmative church. So this manifesto is also published on social media, and more than, I don't know how many, but more than 100,000 people signed that manifesto immediately. So it's quite a success story in the German Roman Catholic Church. Meanwhile, just at the end of April, also a book was published with the same title. I can show it to you. It's also called Out in Church, for a church without fear. And that's very important, this church without fear, because I can really confirm, listening to Ulrike for 16 years now, that there is a lot of fear and pressure in that church. And that's exactly what Christian churches should not be about. They should be about open and affirmative spaces, safe spaces for everybody. And the Roman Catholic is not really fulfilling these standards. So there is a lot of pressure also now from bottom up instead of, top down. And Michael Brinkschröder, who is also one of our friends from the European Forum of Christian LGBT plus people, is one of the publishers. So he is certainly one of the people who can tell much more about that. But for me personally, and it's about my perspective here, it was a very powerful and encouraging process to see this happen, and to also now be listening carefully to the bishops that either say and comment this development or do not say anything, like the bishop in Cologne. He's not commenting on it at all. He is known to be very conservative and very homophobic. Others are much more open and supportive, and they try within a so-called synodaler process, this kind of dialogue between all the people involved, to get further with this whole issue that has been such a huge obstacle for fair and just relationships within the Catholic Church for so long. So I really do hope, also as a supportive and Protestant minister in solidarity with this Catholic movement, that this will be successful also on the level of church laws and structures, because we have to be clear about that. As long as the structures and the church laws do not get changed, it's nice to have a bishop say it's all okay and you will not get fired, but you have no guarantee and no security, and that's not enough. That's not really acceptable. But again, we need to know that it will take time and that there is still a lot to do. But the start is set, at least in Germany, and I hope, and I'm sure it's not only encouraging for Christian Catholics in Germany, but it's really a sign to the Roman Catholic family worldwide, and it's also a sign for ecumenical work for social justice and equality for all.
So the Reformation is happening in Germany again.
Well, let's hope for that. Yeah, again, it's true. It's a good point. Of course, it's a very specific context and we cannot do it for others, but it's a sign of hope and encouragement. And we do need that in these times.
Yes, and I certainly hope that your words will come true and that it will just spread from Germany to other countries, probably first to the Western countries and then more the Eastern European. But let's hope that it's going to spread, because luckily we are more connected today, so things spread more easily than
Exactly.
they did before.
Yeah. And with the social media, of course, and
Yes.
the presence, the visibility of those people there with their stories, that's just heartbreaking and touching and encouraging all at the same time.
Yes. And I'm actually, dear viewers and listeners, if you want to watch the documentary, unfortunately, it's only in German. So you can find the link in the podcast description and watch it if you understand German. Or maybe you can get a translator that can help you to understand it. I've seen it and it's really interesting. So let's get back a little bit to you and your story. This podcast is made in partnership with the European Forum, and I know that the European Forum played a very important part in your life. Can you
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about its role in your life?
Yeah. Well, I was at the European Forum as a delegate for the first time in 1996. It was the conference was in Oslo in Norway. I was sent by my ecumenical home network, which is called La Pristea. It's a network for bisexual, lesbian, and queer women interested in feminist liberation theology and queer theologies later on. And I have been part of that network since 1990, so already for quite a while. And then we decided to also try to get connected to a more European framework and look for allies and other people in Europe and beyond to share ideas and experiences about lesbian feminist theologies, about liturgies and services that are held in a affirmative and inclusive way. So that was why I was sent with two friends of mine to go to Oslo in 1996. And actually, what happened there? It was a wonderful conference. It was empowering. It was wow for me. It was a flash of so many different experiences and a real firework of different feelings. And the most important thing also for my personal life is that I met my ex-partner Randi Solberg from Oslo, and she was one of the delegates from the Norwegian delegation, and she was one of those who had prepared the conference. We fell in love and first thought, well, that's a conference fling. But actually, it turned out to be much more than that. We, in the end, were together for around 9 years and shared immensely our personal life, of course, but also our activist life during those 9 years, certainly within the framework of the European Forum, because I went to the European Forum in 1996 for the first time and actually stayed there ever since. And, I call the European Forum my family of choice. And so you get already a feeling of how important the European Forum is for my personal life, certainly because of my ex-partner, but because of the whole thing. It just blew my mind, and I got to know so many different people, voices, perspectives. We shared parties, discos, and inclusive and affirmative queer services throughout all these years, and I made just the best friends that I call my European family on so many different areas that I'm extremely grateful for being part of that European forum. And but to come back to Randi and myself, that was of course for my personal life then very much shaping. We not only had 9 years of relationship. We had a long distance relationship for a couple of years between Oslo and Frankfurt when we still started our relationship and didn't know where it was going. Obviously not. We lived together in New York for a year when I did a year at the Lutheran World Federation as a theologian, a lecturer, and a counselor. And then we lived together in the minister's house in a parish in Frankfurt for around 4 years in a so-called normal parish. And that was for me and my biography as a professional minister and as a queer activist a very interesting experience.
So you worked in a so-called normal parish. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, well, it was difficult and exciting all at the same time. It started already quite well, you might say, different from the normal path. The church council has to vote for a minister to become the minister of the parish. And in the church council, where I presented myself as lesbian minister, feminist theologian, and living together with a Norwegian partner, and that we were planning to live also in the minister's house together if they were voting for me. So it showed up that there was a minority of conservative Christians that didn't want me, but a majority was in favor of me and us, the whole package, the queer package, so to say. So they decided to have a test phase for me, 3 months of testing whether it was okay for the parish to have me as a lesbian minister and my partner with me in the pastor's house and all the rest of it, whether that would work out. That was actually the first time in history that happened, at least to my knowledge. I'm not sure, here I was, the lesbian minister, being tested for 3 months if I was good enough for the parish. So anyway, I said yes to that, and we both, Rani and me, moved into that minister's house for a test phase of 3 months. We didn't know there was a risk that it would end after 3 months, but anyway. Okay, so we had discussions and debates, and meanwhile I started my normal work as a minister, and after those 3 months they actually decided again that they would love to have me longer, and also with me and my partner. So a majority again said it's wonderful to work with Kerstin and also with her partner. There is fresh air, there are new perspectives to church lives. There actually new people are coming. They're much more colorful, they're younger, they're queerer, all come to church or to the activities of the parish. And before that they said, well, we don't have any queer people in the parish, so why should we have a lesbian minister? So obviously they were just not there because they were not interested. All of a sudden they all came. We had debates about, the clobbered passages, the negative passages in the Bible, and how you can also read them differently. And still a minority of conservative Christians would still say, we don't have anything against you personally, but in the Bible, quote, we can read that God is not in favor of homosexuality, and it's a sin, and it's not how things should be. And we read the Bible, we quote it, and that's why we are against you. So, the things that happen, very, very many of us know that. So we had this type of discussions, but in the end we stayed. And looking back to it now, I would say that we had, it were the years in the parish were an intense and mutual learning experience, not only for me and Rani, but also for the parish people. We got to know one another, we worked together, I did all the normal things. I preached in church, I visited the sick and the old, held a confirmation class for the youth, and they were, by the way, very curious to hear more about lesbian and gay stuff and queer stuff. And quite some of them came out also as gay or lesbian at the time. I counseled the lonely and unhappy, blessed the couples, baptized babies, and buried the dead. So I did what pastors have to do, but I very often, you know, gave it a little queer twist in my preachings, in the things I said, in the things I showed from about myself and my partner. We were visible without having an L word on our forehead all the time, you know. So I was not on a mission, but I tried to just be myself and show it to the people the way I was, and try to be open and welcoming and warm-hearted to everybody who showed up, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and inter people, queer people. I had a clear sign of this parish is welcoming queer people just as anybody else. And that's how I want to see, and how I see Christian parishes should be, you know, like
Yeah.
a hospitable, open, safe space for all. And people, I think, noticed that, and they believed me that I'm trying to. I mean, there were crises and conflicts and all the rest of it, just as in all normal parishes, but they did believe me that that is what I was standing for, and I was preaching the same way. So there was this authentic voice, and I had some kind of street credibility for very many people that yes, she is doing what she is doing, and she's not only preaching it and talking about it, she's also doing it. And that, I think, in general is very important for for pastoral work, to be credible. So together in that parish, we created a colorful bricolage, I would say, of different life stories, resources, and experiences. We had joyful parties and celebrations, and we had painful times when we had to mourn over loss of parish people, like in all these other parishes also. So when I finally left the church, because I got a new job as lecturer at the University of Frankfurt, the parish member actually organized a big party for us and wished us all the best. So in that sense, it, as I said at the beginning, it was a very good learning experiences for all those who were critical and skeptical at the beginning, also for us, because I also learned to put down some cliches, stereotypes, and boxes about conservative Christians and parishes. I also I apologized within myself, actually, to very many that turned out to be much more open and progressive and supportive than I thought they would be. Even the seniors club people, just to finish this story, when there was still, you know, this discussion, do they stay or do they go? Some members of the senior club that I visited once a week, they told me one afternoon, you know, we heard that you have trouble with some people in the church council. Well, we want you to stay, and you please let us know if you need some solidarity, because we are open to parade in the streets of Frankfurt, have our umbrellas with us, and say that we want her to stay. So much for that cliche that older people are always homophobic or, you know, transphobic. No. They were very clear about that. They wanted me to stay. And that, I think, was very, very cute and very encouraging, and is one of these little stories of experiences from a normal parish.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing this story. And I so agree with what you said about senior people that there is a lot of discrimination against them. And sometimes they can connect better to some things than we give them credit for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems like even when you were in this normal parish, you already started to be an activist. I mean, you were a pastor foremost, but at the same time, you did a lot of work to talk about the issues with queer people. So I know that you are an activist, lesbian feminist, and also for queer rights. So can you tell us a little bit more about your activism in the European Forum, but also wider?
Yeah. Well, to start with the European Forum again, all the way from 1996, the next decade, I would say, I was very much involved together with other sisters and brothers and siblings to do this kind of queer activist work in the framework of the European Forum. First, we started actually to change the European Forum a little from within, because as a lesbian feminist, together with Randi and other forum sisters, we really saw and experienced that the European Forum was at that time, very much shaped by gay men. It was very much male-dominated. 2/3, were still gay or male. Some were trans, bisexual, I don't know, but it was very male-dominated, not only in persons, but also in their way of theology and liturgy. The language in the liturgy was very male, often at least. So we decided to have a whole process in first having more women being visible and in charge of many things within the structures of the European Forum. So we had in our bylaws, we made sure that from there on there would always be a male and a female co-president. Later it could also be a trans person. So we also learned from there. But at that time, the female visibility was important to us, and to start the process of more going into the question of what is queer theology, lesbian feminist theology all about. And it's certainly about also the visibility of female voices, that their experiences are not only heard and accepted, but also transform into the way things within the organization are done, and transforms into the way theology is done. Because in theology, you always have the mix between personal experiences and the theological reflections. So the personal experience should also reflect female lives, lesbians, bisexuals, queer women. They should more be in the front line of what we did. So we changed that around within the structures of the European Forum. And to support this kind of work, Randi again was publishing a book about almost 100 lesbian, bisexual women from 26 European countries in Europe, different denominations and age, to tell their lesbian and Christian or bisexual or whatever queer stories from a female or very different, diverse female perspectives. So this book was extremely important for us as a toolkit. Let Our Voices Be Heard was the title, Christian lesbians telling their stories. And so it was about visibility, it was about being heard, and more being aware of the diversity of female voices and their backgrounds and contexts all over Europe, and to have those stories and storytelling as toolkits for activist work, so that it was a more feminist, lesbian, bisexual perspective, rather than only, of course I know that only is not the right word, listening to gay men. I don't know about your country, but also in Germany for very long, when it came to discussions about homosexuality in church, it was mostly gay men, if at all, that were asked to, share their stories. So again, it was fighting for a feminist point of view and the visibility of female persons. So that took us a long time. And then we had this book, we made book readings and conferences. We did trainings and workshops. And one big thing that I'm still very proud of is that we also created a so-called safe space leadership project for Christian queer activists in Central and Eastern Europe. And we had this first training in the years 2004, 2005, 2006. It was 3 weeks of intensely working together, always connected to some kind of European conference. And we worked with 10 plus Eastern European mentees. We had mentors from all over Europe and did queer theology just as much as working with the Clubber text, doing strategic work of how to find allies in the straight world for, equality and justice for all within the queer world in some kind of church backgrounds. And then having in mind all the different denominations, Orthodox churches, Roman Catholic, Protestant churches, and all the rest of it. So that was quite a thing. And this Safe Space project was actually the blueprint for all the leadership and mentoring projects that came, that were also put into practice afterwards. So we actually met in a mentoring program in the framework of the European Forum, and that was one of the one of the projects that built upon the blueprint that basically Randy and me and some other friends within the European Forum built up at the time. So, that was for me also as a theologian, as a queer theologian, very, very fruitful and hopeful to see this, this work with mentors and mentees, with queer theology, with strategic work, with ally work, to see and also listen to the people themselves of how they see their context and their church communities, what they need, what they also face within their home communities. And me being German or Annie being Norwegian or some other Western people, it's good to know that they know about their queer theology, but who cares about that basically in Serbia or in Romania or in Moldova, where the challenges are very different from ours. You know all about it. And so again, it was a very mutual learning experience to do this type of project work and activist work together with others, but learn just as much as the so-called mentees that of course are experts in their own life stories. And that's up to this day one of the big treasures I'm so grateful for, that doing this type of work is learning together, is listening to one another, is building up something that is meaningful for everybody and not just for some kind of polite work for somebody else. No, it's eye contact and it's eye level and it's respect, it's mutual respect that is so empowering here. So this really is what my queer and lesbian feminist activist work is all about, and I share that in the 2000 and up to 10 I shared that a lot with Randy and Forum Sisters, and later on it changed again. I also had my projects outside of the European Forum, but up to this day I would still say the most of my activist work I learned strategic tools and instruments of how to develop queer subjects in a way that they are sustainable and also visible in structures and not only in thoughts and persons in the framework of the European Forum. And I'm very grateful for that. On the other hand, it's all voluntary work, you know that. And at the same time, all of us have to work, for a living. So that is also sometimes a challenge. And I also see that happening with very many. Some burn out, some others lose their energy and time. I also had to go through times of crisis because I needed to be the pastor or the lecturer at university or the researcher or the counselor, and at the same time have this kind of voluntary work that was and still is very meaningful, but it also really takes time and energy from you, and you're not always in the same way fit and open for this type of work. So I also had to learn over the years and decades to more channel the type of work and choose your fights, so to speak, of where I am active and where I'm not. So this high level of energy to activist work I had to reduce later. And just to finish it here, it also had consequences, for instance, for the relationship of Rani and me. We were so closely linked in our personal private life and our activist life that we also noticed at one point that we had a lot of conflicts coming up because of this mix of different things. And I think quite a lot of people who do intensely volunteers work know probably what I'm talking about. So in the end, after 9 years, really, we split up, not only for activist reasons, certainly. It's always a bundle of things. It was a very difficult and painful process for both of us, but it was also a good, it was in the end okay also for both of us. It was a mutual decision to split up. And after 2 years of break, total break and silence, we really could meet as friends. Obviously, again, there was a process and not just click and we are there. Yeah. But we went through this process and now we are friends, and I'm very grateful for that. And also, we can also meet with the very partners. I can meet with Eli Ragnar and Ulrike. The four of us, we have spent vacations together. So again, you see the development. I'm very grateful for that. But that's also the downside maybe of this very personally motivated, intrinsically motivated process, that also relationships, affairs, and all the rest of it comes in the middle, and it might also affect your work and your activist work. But I guess that's just the beauty of life, to have all of that, the ups and downs in there, and I don't regret a thing. Well, maybe some or one or two things. Yeah. No, but that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being vulnerable with your relationships, and thank you for sharing this. It's also nice to hear, the light again behind the story, and after some hard times that there is light. So thank you for that. So you are not just an activist, you're also an author, and you actually quite recently published another book. Was it recently, or did I just find out recently?
Well, I published it in 2020, just around COVID time, so COVID lockdown. So it really still is recently, because all the reading stuff that I wanted to do really got cancelled due to COVID-19.
Yeah, the world stopped for almost 2 years. So you even got a feminist prize for this book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so happy for you that you get recognized and that you get acknowledgement for your work. I think that this is really important, that other people see what people are doing and publishing. So can you tell us a little bit more about your book and also about the prize and what both of them mean to you?
Yeah, I can. Thanks for asking. Well, first of all, I will show you the book and try. It's called in German Queer Theologische Notizen, Queer Theological Notes. And as I said, it's published in 2020, and it's actually, it consists of more than 50 blog posts and small essays that I wrote in the years of 2015 to 2020. I am actually, since 2015, I'm writing blog posts with some queer friends of mine in a Protestant online magazine called evangelisch.de, evangelical.de. Yes, and those once a month, approximately, I'm writing one of these posts, and my colleagues are writing at other times. And they all belong to the section Kreuz und Queer, cross and queer, literally translated. And it means, in German, it's a wordplay with Kreuz und Quer, which means something like here and there and everywhere. And obviously it's also wordplay with cross and the cross, the Christian sign, and queer. So it's about all these diverse different subjects within the world of Christianity and queer. So my blog posts actually deal with the church political topics from Germany and beyond, also internationally, and topics about religious groups and faith issues from queer perspectives. That's, again, very important for me. And they deal with queer topics from a Christian perspective. So it's always this, I always try to bridge the two, Christianity and the queer perspective. And those blog posts together form this book that you mentioned. And I'm very proud of it. It's these various pieces of my life. So they are just as diverse and personal as my life is, a bricolage of so many different things. And maybe that's also precisely what is interesting about this book. It's not a theology book as a systematic book in a box and with categories and systematic dogmatic thoughts. No, it's little stories, personal stories that are reflecting some of my experiences and some of my knowledge about queer theology and biblical stories. So it's this interesting mix. And yes, you asked me about this prize. I actually got the so-called Leonore Prize. It's a feminist and gender affirmative prize in Germany that I got for my book. And we had a big celebration actually in November last year, and I was very grateful for the prize for two reasons maybe. One is that at some point the years before, I thought, well, I do this kind of queer activist work as a theologian, and if I do it, or in China somebody throws rice down the balcony, who cares? And of course that's not true, but sometimes you get frustrated and you are exhausted and you think, well, why am I doing this? Is somebody noticing what I'm doing, and is somebody really recognizing and acknowledging this extra work that I'm doing next to my professional job, even though of course they are very often also linked to one another, I have to say very clearly. And yes, here comes the prize, and people say, we appreciate what she is doing. We appreciate also the what they call the innovative, the more a personal approach to these subjects. Not this heavy theological stuff, but personal little stories, like blog posts are little stories connected to personal experiences, but reflected in a queer theological way. And we like this interesting mix that is not very often seen and heard of, at least not in the German context, because very often theology still is this heavy, serious stuff. And it should not be subjective, and it should not be personal, and it should not be personal stories. Even though, of course, we all know that whoever reads the Bible or talks about theology, it's always coming from a personal or a subjective or a very, a very contextualized point of view. So it's more the question whether you admit that or not. And I do admit it, and I play with it. And I think I enjoy it. And I'm extremely grateful that I got this prize. And the visibility, of course, papers wrote about it. They made interviews with me. And ever since, I also get more invitations to, for readings, for book readings and stuff. And my students noticed it and they want to read it, and we discuss it in workshops and so on and so forth. So that is, it's really a cool thing that I got this prize for the book.
Yeah, I can hear what you were saying. Well, what I actually heard is that it's really important when we do some work and invest so much time, that it's really important that it actually makes sense. All this
Absolutely.
energy and time invested into whatever we do. So I can connect so well with what you were saying, that it's nice to see, oh, people do read what I write, or they do listen to what I say, or what I do. So I'm so glad that this happened to you. And I think that people sometimes think, when there are people, like especially when you are visible, very visible, like an author, speaker, leader of any kind, they think, oh, they know they're great, they don't need any feedback from us. But it's actually not true. We are all
Exactly.
human, and we
Yeah.
want to hear that whatever we do, it really makes sense. And some people, it is useful to people, because that's why we are mostly doing this. So people, don't forget to leave a feedback. Okay, so there's so many things: author, pastor, counselor, activist. What is happening in your life now, where you're at? What are you living for now?
Good question. Well, personally, I have told you already that I'm looking forward to our blessing ceremony, and that we're busy planning all the things with families and friends, so that's exciting, and I'm looking forward to that. And in
Nice.
terms of my activism and my theology, well, I guess I'm still I'm still fighting on this religious battleground, so to speak, because I'm just convinced that, or the way I see it is that it's important not to leave this field of religion, or Christianity more specifically, since I'm Christian myself, to Christian fundamentalists or Christian right people, or, those charismatic people who detest homosexuality, or who fight queer affirmative rights, and so on and so forth. So I am a theologian, I am a queer activist, so I stay in that battlefield. And at the same time, it's not only a battlefield, I also see it with the eyes of a counselor. I told you at the beginning that I'm a university chaplain now for the last 2.5 years at the University of Mainz, working there in a very ecumenical partnership with Catholic counselors and chaplains and some others. That's a very fruitful network there. And we all, certainly during COVID-19, the pandemic and the stressful situation there, but also as a general impression, still see so many students fighting with lots of pressure and stress, in terms of their exams, in terms of all the things that they have to write and read and present. And then now, more specifically for this podcast, also those students who at the same time live through their coming out questions and or times of transition, and all the questions and challenges that are connected to that. And for them, that's what they also tell me. It's extremely important that they know that I'm a lesbian minister and call myself lesbian or queer, and that it's open, that it's visible on our website, it's visible everywhere where we do things, and we also have queer-friendly services and prayer meetings. We have queer-friendly lectures and sharing groups, biblical groups, and so on and so forth. So they know that, and they come to me. And many of them have traumatic experiences or painful experiences or whatever. So you ask me, what am I doing? Well, I'm also being there with them, and I'm listening to them. I try to stay there, even if I don't have words, and of course I don't have recipes, but I can show that I understand them, that I'm there with them, that I have made my own experiences, and now they make theirs, and we can see together what will be hopeful for them. What kind of resources and sources of resilience do they have? We can look for them together. What kind of network do they have? What people are supportive for them, and so on. what counselors do, quality standard things. But here it's again important that they know that they don't have to, defend themselves for who they are, or that they are searching for their gender identity or their sexual orientation. They can just be the one that they are. And I say, well, you are a precious and wonderful child of God, and you are created in the image of God, unique, and just wonderful the way you are. And you don't have to defend anything. You don't have to do anything. Just be the person that you are. And I know it's easy to say and very difficult to live that. And I know it as a pastor and a counselor, but I also know it from my personal experiences. So that's why I'm there, and that's why I'm visible and present, and that's why I offer my professional work. And on the maybe the last thing here, I'm again writing a book. I'm in the process of writing a new book, and I hope to have it published by the end of the year. It's about queer sensitive counseling. And for the reasons I just told you, I think it's important. And at least in the German speaking world, there is not so much written about this type of thing. I use my own counseling cases, of course, with pseudonyms and making sure that the privacy of the people coming to me are respected. I use those cases as starting point to reflect about theology and what it means to offer and to do queer sensitive counseling, and to make sure to have that also in classes and formation classes for people who want to become counselors in the future. So that's the type of work I do. Otherwise, I'm passionately preaching, re-lecturing biblical stories from a queer perspective, counseling, or doing all the stuff that I do as a pastor. And also with a sense of humor and twinkling in my eye, I try to also use a lot of energy to not only take things so seriously. Maybe as a German, I'm a little in danger to always be so strict. And no, I am an activist, and I can be very serious and I can be very tough. But I'm also warm-hearted and joyful, and I also try to make sure that this is part of my life, like my sports and my music. That I certainly also always enjoying good company, certainly after the pandemic, now that we are allowed to sit in cafes and bars again. I'm enjoying just being there with family and friends, but also with students. We have this university chaplaincy bar where people meet in the evenings, and I also enjoy talking to students and learning from them.
So what do you hope for the future, to end with this question at the end of our interview?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. Well, I certainly have this dream of an open and affirmative and queer, supportive religious communities, and of course also society at large, where we can just live in our diversity and in our uniqueness and belong, and not fight against one another, but respect one another on equal grounds. That's my dream, and I see the flowers, the seeds grow where things like that, like in the European Forum and so many other queer networks. This is already presence, and this is already lived and shared. But I would love to see that everywhere, and not only in the northwestern world, but certainly in places like in Eastern Europe and in Russia and other places where being lesbian, gay, queer is still criminalized and a reason to get imprisoned and be in jail, or even worse, in 7 countries we know that it's still a reason to be killed with, with death penalty, at least gay men, certainly mostly men. So of course that I want to get rid of all that. I want this just place where we all have this in theological terms. It's called this God's shalom, this being respectful and safe place for all. That's what I dream of, and I know it's still a long way. That's why I and others, certainly not alone, but together with others, need and still go on with what we do in terms of theology, in terms of activism, in terms of being out there, being visible and queer. So otherwise, I'm right now, for the close future, I'm looking forward to our next European Forum conference in Zurich, in Switzerland, end of May, and I hope to see lots of people there that I know and that I don't know yet, to again, set examples of these safe places and queer affirmative places that we in small places can already have and share and be in solidarity of, so that we can all go home to our places and try to make the world a better place. And that's big words, I know. And it's very romanticized, because certainly now with the war in Ukraine, there are so many big issues and big problems and challenges with the war, with atrocities going on right next door to us. And I know we could talk about that for another 5 podcasts, but now it's this queer perspective that we are focusing on. So I hope these seeds of solidarity, respect, and mutual acceptance can just grow for all.
Well, we talked beforehand, and you actually said, you whispered, I heard something that you have a poem. Would you like to share your poem?
Yes, I would very much like to do that. Thanks that you thought of it. It's a poem which is also published in German in my book, and I've translated it into English. And sorry for my English, it might not be perfect, but anyway. It's called Not Only at Easter. Pushing away walls of fear and prejudice. Rolling stones away from constraints, norms, and narrow boundaries. Finally daring to show myself. To say I, to be there, to take up space, the way I am, just as God created me. Wonderfully made and blessed. Easter. Out of tombs and caves of fixed ideas, a person shows her his them face, confesses to her himself themselves, look, that's me. I'm wanted, I'm accepted and blessed by God. Coming out of the prisons of heteronormativity and binary systems. What should the neighbors say? How can you do this to us? What have we done wrong? No longer willing to lie, no longer able to wear masks, no longer willing to hide in the closet. Easter. Then someone did it for us. He stepped out of violence, hatred, and death. He stepped out of the tomb. He overcame deadly expectations and called out to us, see, I'm alive, so you live too. Coming out, stepping out of the tombs of prejudice, mobbing, and hate crimes, daring to be myself as I am, created by God in her image, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, inter, genderqueer, without a box, without a label, without a seal of normality, and be blessed. Just being me, stepping out of the tombs of prejudice, not just at Easter.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. Thank you, dear Kerstin, for being with us today and for sharing more about yourself, for being vulnerable about your story, and that we could be a part of your journey towards from not being out towards becoming a lesbian feminist and queer activist and pastor and writer and poet and so many things. Thank you for sharing all your identities here. From what I see is that we're going to talk again soon when you publish your book. I think that this is really interesting. Maybe we don't have to talk so much about the book, but more about the content. Well, it's about the book at the end. I think it's really important to have queer people in mind in counseling and their specific needs, not special needs.
Absolutely.
Thank you, dear viewers and listeners, for being with us. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, comment in the comment section. All the necessary links will be in the podcast description below. You can also find a link to Kerstin's webpage where you can find her book or the title and find it online where you can buy it. And this podcast was made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. It is also part of the series Let Us Be Heard, supported by HMS. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time. Bye, everyone, and bye, Kerstin.
Bye-bye, Michael, and thank you so much for the time that we shared. I very much appreciate it.